With the advent of the Galactic Civil War, the rebels among you have been making attempts, such as this one, to sway the opinion of the greater galactic populace to the respective ideals and larger galaxy-spanning goals of the Alliance, and the one part of the Empire facing the most scrutiny from this organised rebel war on the spread and control of information is you guys within the Imperial Stormtrooper Corps. And as the title suggests, we are here today to answer one simple question regarding Stormtroopers. Are they really that bad? So, our ISD has decided to stop off at this local trooper garrison to repair and resupply, and being in here among the troopers has got me thinking. All of this rebel and anti-imperial propaganda seems to push the idea that stormtroopers are somehow the worst of the worst, that a rigorously trained military force of adaptable soldiers are incapable of aiming a blaster, engaging in basic squad cohesion, and are easily defeated in great numbers at the hands of the self-proclaimed superior rebel forces, who, mind you, are not in any better of a position than the stormtroopers. So, who better qualified than I, a Starfighter Corps Major who's never served a day in his life on a ground-based front line, to speak on behalf of all you good men and women out there serving the Imperial war machine as the Empire's elite ground troops. To answer the question, we first have to ask ourselves, what is a Stormtrooper? Well, it's this: an individual brandishing the standard issue white plastoid armour and utilising a blaster. This person is commonly assigned to the vast variety of operation for the Empire's planetary surface and ground occupation forces. What many people don't know is that Stormtroopers are in fact an elite fighting force, utilised only when they are needed, which is when the Empire wants to bring in that extra muscle and better coordination into a conflict, being a drastic step up in rank from the expendable forces of the Imperial Army. What makes the Stormtrooper Corps unique compared to the Imperial Army is with its range of trooper types, or specialised combat and environmental focused trooper variants, a necessary structural component to the ground forces as a whole, with selective specialisations, allowing commanding officers to strategise the most effective means to occupy the many different biomes, ecologies and environments throughout the planets within Imperial territory. Desert troopers, sand troopers, mortar troopers, riot troopers, shock troopers, death troopers, purge troopers, scout troopers, cave troopers and so much more. If it exists and can be controlled or influenced in some way, then there's likely a trooper type for that, with role denoting colour combinations and patterns, allowing even the slowest and most unperceptive of Imperial officers to recognise what each trooper's specialty is, along with what environment and what operation they are best suited for. And that is how this Corps is capable of empowering the Empire to have control over so many vast and geographically diverse planets. But the Imperial TK and its evolution into an army more focused on galactic domination can trace its lineage back to a former trooper type of the Grand Army of the Republic. I don't need to bore you with the details of the Clone Wars, Republic Clone Army versus the Separatist Droid Army. What you need to understand is that the legacy forged by these clones is a mostly forgotten one, these troopers finding their expertise no longer needed as they were completely phased out in favour of conscription of regular humanoid citizens from all across the galaxy. But the consensus among those opposing the Empire is drastically different from those within. They believe the clones were better soldiers that were competent at their job and were far more invested in their war effort as a whole. And that's not entirely incorrect. Where the clones have the advantage over conscripted troopers, it's down to the fact that they were created for one purpose, and that is war. A fully manufactured army of biological droids, you could say, almost unquestionably obedient to the Republic, its Senate and its Chancellor. But this dedication was not just given to the governing bodies of that time, but to each other, as they had an exceedingly strong sense of brotherhood, something Stormtroopers lack and not through any fault of their own. This connection through brotherly relation was a strong one that permeated through almost all clone troopers, and this can be seen throughout the structure of the Grand Army itself. Squads, platoons, legions and more comprised the military organisations of the clones and was vital to their coordination efforts against the sheer size of the droid army. Through a clearly defined chain of command, certain clones were chosen to take charge as commander in one of these legions, which is crucial in an army where everyone looks the same. And in a military force where everyone around you is one giant extended family born and customised equally to fight, it was not hard for the clones and the brothers they called family to have related among themselves to the environment they have been forced into. Cap that off with the singular unified goal of pushing back the invading droid forces, and you can see how the clones shared such a strong bond, regardless of wondering what was in it for them or even what their purpose was after the war had concluded. That goal gave them a sense of purpose, reflected through their adoration for each other and through the armour they wore, customised to bring forth what individual type of person each clone wanted to be. Here in the Empire, TK armour is worn to degrade the wearer's sense of individuality and personal identity, assimilating the trooper into the collective hierarchy of the Empire's military. The Republic did not have this deeper psychological intention in mind, being a democratic system of course. The clones were permitted the freedom of full customization with new paint jobs, patterns and insignia, a reflection of each clone's personality and the legion they served, a luxury not given to Stormtroopers. But good soldiers follow orders, as the clones used to say, and it rings true even now across the halls of time, as the clones have set the standard for what the Stormtroopers should be, with both variants proving themselves to be fierce and loyal fighters who will dedicate themselves to the cause of the ruling body they fight on behalf of, regardless of background or whether you were conceived in a vat of liquid or in the womb. In principle, the difference between the CTs and the TKs is that it is a lot harder for two individuals born halfway across the galaxy from each other to come together and fight for an emperor they won't ever get a glimpse of, than two clones born on the same planet in the same cloning facility and conditioned their entire life to fight a war that for years will be the only thing they know and care about, for a chancellor, a senate, and an entire governing system that relies solely on their success to survive, simply being the nature of circumstance. But as most of you know, TKs are facing a situation that is nothing like the Clone Wars. Stormtroopers are faced with a different enemy than the droid army the clones had to face during the Clone Wars. We are dealing with the Rebellion. Rather than the hordes of droids which a vast division of Stormtroopers would have an easier time with, fate has gifted the Empire's ground troops with an enemy whose preferred method of combat is, Emperor forbid, guerrilla warfare. This form of offensive engagement from the rebels is the likely culprit for the perceived ineffectiveness of the Stormtrooper Corps, as the troopers, and by extension the Empire, has struggled to deal with a fighting force that chooses not to take its enemy head on. The Stormtrooper Corps' specialty is traditional attrition style warfare, two enemy forces bearing down upon each other in a straightforward head-to-head battle. This works brilliantly for the Stormtroopers because of the training they received to fight this type of battle, taking what was learned from the Clone Wars, and some of the clones who persisted to train new Imperial recruits. For the Rebels, however, this is not ideal, given what we know of their focus on maintaining what military resources they can and can't afford to lose. It's not that the Rebels don't have a formidable standing army, they do, and you can't underestimate them in that regard. but they will never have access to the very literal galaxy-sized pool of expendable armed forces that the Empire has and can afford to keep throwing at a problem until it goes away, which doesn't include the rebels, much to the dismay of most Imperials. With that in mind, we understand why the rebels have adopted the strategy of tactical hit and runs, and it's so effective against Stormtroopers as in essence, it's a cycle. One which prevents the Stormtroopers from fully pinning down any proper offensive within a sector, as there is never just one but many coordinated rebel cells attacking Imperial installations across different locales at any given time, using geographical elements, natural fauna and conspiring with planetary locals who may or may not be so privy to the heavy Imperial presence. The result is a chaotic scramble and pursuit in which ground forces are required to be relocated on a constant basis, shifted from planet to planet as the army and its resources are stretched thin. The further from the core we go, the worse these logistics issues get, so it is a bit of a shame that most of the galaxy's rebel presence just happens to be located in the Outer Rim. This is the stark difference between the rebel and Imperial ground forces. Rebels set themselves up in rudimentary holdouts, bases and camps that can be dismantled, packed up and used to skip town and get out of dodge should push come to shove. Imperial ground forces prefer permanent structures, bases and garrisons for its troops, which for the Emperor's goal of ruling the entire galaxy is great, but for dealing with an enemy that won't stop moving its forces, it can be a bit of a detriment. On a wide scale, it seems a lot of these issues are foundational to the Empire's military structure itself. And they are, don't tell the ISB I said that. And I know what you're thinking, but having the Stormtroopers adapt and incorporate guerrilla warfare into their own tactics is just not on the cards for High Command for some reason. But what about an individual Stormtrooper? The person behind the helmet. What is the first thing the citizens of the galaxy directly interact with within the Empire? It's not the Star Destroyers overhead. It isn't us in the Starfighter core, and it certainly isn't the Death Star. It's you, the Stormtroopers. Stormtrooper armour is both a symbol that shields their identity to blame of the Emperor's dirty work as much as it is a practical tool of warfare, protecting the wearer from the physical factors of planetary environments and the dangers of conflict. It can regulate body temperature, keeping the suit interior both warm and cool in biomes of extremely varied temperature. If, say, a Stormtrooper was on a volcanic planet with toxic ash, then the suit can protect the wearer's lungs with a built-in rebreather to flush out deadly toxins. For a brief time, the suit is capable of letting a trooper survive in the vacuum of space. Not that they would be out there in the first place, but it just goes to show that there is more than meets the eye with this crucial piece of equipment. To the eye of the trooper, the visual aspects of the helmet's lenses feature built-in night vision, anti-glare, and motion detection within smoke or thick fog, at the cost of field of vision, which is reduced. In the heat of battle, tactical communication is a must, which is the most important part to the Stormtrooper Corps given the vast number of troops on active duty. For ease of relaying instructions to such a great number of them, each and every helmet is connected to a comms network, allowing commanding troopers and officers to provide instructions back and forth on a mass scale, a preferable alternative to a handheld comm-like device, meaning they no longer have to juggle a blaster and a comm in the middle of a firefight. Organisation is pretty damn good when it comes to Stormtrooper armour, and the best aspect of this can be found in here. A compact and neatly organised utility belt that offers the essentials: rations if you get hungry, a C1 comlink if the one in your helmet no longer works, macro binoculars for spotting enemy forces, handheld DIY utility tools for taking apart an assembly, a grappling hook, that one can explain itself, and a spare baradium thermal detonator for if you feel like giving the enemy an extra special gift. The utility belt is excellent for most situations, as there will be something in those pouches that a trooper can utilise for most challenges that present themselves in warfare. What a utility belt can't stop, however, is this. Standard issue Stormtrooper armour does not grant the wearer total protection from blaster fire. Maybe a little bit, but if the enemy has a good enough shot, then the bolt will pierce straight through that plastoid plating. It is a point that is exploited through the rebel propaganda, and it's not entirely wrong. But the armour was never designed to make a trooper invincible to blaster bolt. It's for increasing chances of survivability out in the field against a multitude of different factors from the environment, and probably to cut back on spending costs with military equipment. But anyway, are the rebels with no armour really in any better of a position as opposed to having some protection? Albeit, it is a trade-off they have given for more manoeuvrability in their troops, both sides having made some kind of transaction like this. But at the core of the anti-Stormtrooper sentiment is their ability to aim a blaster, or lack thereof. Which, would you believe me if I said that's not true, as the majority of Stormtroopers have decent aim. It just depends on the assigned operation and if they're ordered to avoid lethality when firing upon a target. It can even extend to the individual themselves and how comfortable they are using a blaster, a possible byproduct of the Empire's emphasis on conscripts, as everyone who becomes a Stormtrooper hails from different backgrounds, so experience will vary. But those that cannot aim have had their issues of skill taken as representing the entire Stormtrooper Corps, a sentiment blown way out of proportion. Besides, high-profile warfare experienced targets are hard to hit, especially where force sensitives are concerned. And also the Corps as a whole makes use of a huge variety of weapons, not just the E11, and like each trooper, each blaster type is intrinsically tied to role and specialisation on the battlefront. The E11 is meant to be the well-rounded standard issue blaster given to the standard TK, but you also have the heavy gunner troopers, utilising Z6 rotary cannons and E-webs to hit the enemy hard with powerful suppression fire, sniper scouts nailing headshots from great distances where enemies least expect, flame troopers using flamethrowers and laying waste to vast amounts of land, ion cannons, rocket launchers, blaster pistols, E11Ds, batons, electro staff. I could go on and on for hours, as the Stormtrooper Corps is not starved for choice when it comes to the many blaster models at their disposal. Would an army that couldn't aim really need that many blasters, each more different than the last and more difficult to use than your typical E11? Some Stormtroopers could benefit from more time in the practice range, for sure, but to say that every Stormtrooper has awful aim is a bit inaccurate considering how many of them there are on active duty. But with all that being said, let's finally answer this question. Are the Stormtroopers really that bad? Well, with what we know of their history, picking up where the clones left off, what they do in warfare and how they fare against the rebels, and finally what equipment has been given to them and what it can offer them, we can conclusively deduce that Stormtroopers are not as bad as they are made out to be. However, it would also be ignorant to say that there are no glaring weaknesses both with Stormtroopers themselves, their armour, and the forces beyond their jurisdiction within the foundational structure of the Empire's military. Under the Tarkin Doctrine, a major core aspect of the Stormtroopers as a force is to instill fear in galactic citizens through oppression and control. Unsurprisingly, this has resulted in a mixed reputation among the galactic populace, with some finding them to be a force to be truly feared and others seeing them as nothing more than lowly Imperial dogs at the bottom of the barrel, trying to do everything in their power to paint them as a force that lacks military discipline, skill, and can be easily challenged by some old schmuck with a blaster and a little bit of determination. Some of these sentiments can be true, but not entirely. It is false information that could be dangerous if it finds its way into the head of the wrong person, who then thinks they can solo a Stormtrooper platoon. As of the Galactic Civil War, more and more battles have been taking place that Stormtroopers are actually trained for, and we all know how good the rebels are at beating the Empire at its own game. Midram offensive, anyone? On an even playing field and in a battle that Stormtroopers are trained for, such as attrition-style warfare, you'll find them to be more than capable at coordinating effective offense attacks or holding down a defense line against waves of enemies, with the many trooper variants bringing adaptability to the Empire's military strategy for most conflicts and environments. Add to that the vast number of troops that are currently enlisted, And despite the issues, the Stormtrooper Corps compensates for it with other factors, making Imperial Stormtroopers a more than capable, adaptable and appropriately feared military force. So there's my 2 credits on it. No, they're really not that bad, but I would love to know what you think, or if you even agree with me at all, so go ahead and leave your thoughts in the comments. But you'll be pleased to know that the sky is not the limit when it comes to what the rebels have to say about this next part of the Imperial military, and unfortunately it's the one that I'm a part of, so stay tuned. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment and subscribe to become a part of the Empire today, and with that, long live the Empire and may the Force be with you.